Good morning and welcome to Daylight Church Online. We're just so thankful that you're joining us this morning and hope that you have a great experience. We want to let you know that if you'll go to mydaylightchurch.com, there's a card there that says Online Church. And on the Online Church card, it'll tell you everything you need to know about being a part of our online church community, how you can get involved in small groups, how you can give financially, how you can be involved in the service projects that we do. So even if you're in Kansas or Cambodia, you can sure join us and be a part of our church. We'd like you to check it out there and introduce yourself. So go to mydaylightchurch.com and check out the online church card. Thanks. Welcome to Passion Week. Today is Palm Sunday, the beginning of Passion Week, and it's the day that Jesus entered Jerusalem on a donkey, and people threw palm leaves in his path and proclaimed, "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord." And I wanted to start by celebrating Palm Sunday a little bit and just putting that in your mind, but I want to fast forward to Thursday. It's called Maundy Thursday, which always as a kid sounded like Monday Thursday to me and confused the fire out of me. My mom was really into Maundy Thursday growing up. She just liked saying it. It rolled off the lips just a particular way, Maundy Thursday. But that Maundy comes from the Latin mandatum. Anybody want to guess what mandatum means in Latin? Mandate, yes. It was quite a good guess. It's mandate, and it's the new command that Jesus gave on Maundy Thursday. A new command I give you. Love one another as I have loved you. And as we find out later in the New Testament, this replaced all of it. This was revolutionary. It was a major explosion in the religious world and the spiritual world where Jesus issued this new mandate on Maundy Thursday. That's going to become more important as we talk about the Last Supper. And I'll be the first to confess that finding a good picture of the Last Supper is an exercise in futility. It's just horrible. Every Jesus is very, very white. Every Jesus has a big halo and white robes and stands in the middle with everybody surrounding him. And it's like, that one's Jesus. As soon as you see the picture, you know who Jesus is. And I like this one. I actually photoshopped out the halo, and then I thought that probably is some kind of artistic devilry to do such, so I put it back. But at least with this one, it takes a fraction of a second to figure out who Jesus is. There's some chaos. He's a person among people. He's still very white, and that ought to bother you. I want to set the scene for this moment for just a second. Last week I talked about me and my kids being on a plane recently where there was terrible turbulence, and the turbulence was terrifying. It was very, very scary, and I was having these images of the wings of the plane disintegrating, us crashing and burning, and which of my kids am I going to hug on the way down was the kind of stuff going through my head. The turbulence was so bad. And it's easy to see that Jesus at this moment would have been experiencing similar, if he were a normal mortal, would have been experiencing similar fear. By all accounts, he knew what was about to happen. He was going to be horribly tortured and murdered in the next couple days. And this is what it says about that. It says, when the hour came, Jesus and his apostles reclined at the table. It speaks of peace in the midst of suffering. And he says this to them. He says, I have eagerly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. In the midst of his trauma, in the midst of the chaos, in the midst of the wings disintegrating around him and him going down, he says, I want to eat with you. If you would grab your mobile devices or your Bibles and turn to Luke chapter 22 with me. We're going to read verses 24 through 30. So this shows what jarheads the disciples were. I mean, just talk about some goofballs. In the middle of this meal where Jesus is saying, I wanted to eat with you before I suffer, it says, a dispute rose among them as to which of them was considered to be the greatest. Jarheads. Jesus said to them, the kings of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who exercise authority over them call themselves benefactors. But you are not to be like that. Instead, the greatest among you should be like the youngest, and the one who rules like the one who serves. For who is greater, the one who is at the table or the one who serves? Notice the use of the table there. It is not the one who is at the table, but I am among you as one who serves. You are those who have stood by me in my trials, and I confer upon you a kingdom, just as my Father conferred one upon me. And then he says this is what I want to point out. It says, so that you may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom and sit on thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Now there is a ton to say about this passage and what was going on here and how boneheaded the disciples were being in this moment. But what I want to point out is that Jesus mentions a throne and a table. And this is a moment of the table. In a world with a Greek pantheon and Roman pantheon where people considered thunder to be the wrath of Zeus, and even the disciples considered, even the Jewish people, they said that that God appeared as a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. That was the image people had of God, was this God that was above and beyond and wrathful and angry and flames and fire and judgment and pounding gavel. And then you find Jesus as he's about to suffer for mankind. In his last sermon with a group of friends, it's funny if you look at where the last location of Jesus has been mythologized, it's been destroyed and reconstructed many, many times, but now it's this big room with pillars, and it probably wasn't. In first century Jerusalem or about that time, it would have been hard to find a big pillared room to have a meal in. They were probably in pretty cramped quarters. And they're reclining together to the point where it says that one of them was leaning his head against Jesus' breast during the meal. That's where you find Jesus. That's the kind of God that Jesus revealed. Jesus gets up and washes the feet of the disciples, and then he talks for a while, and these are revolutionary things. These are monumental in the world of religion and spirituality. It's no longer thunderclaps and wrath. It's a God who touches, who speaks face to face, who connects, and who desires to share a meal. Before this, Moses was the one who was considered the person who spoke face to face to God. There was always this person that was between mankind and God, and it was Moses. He spoke face to face. Now we're finding God speaking face to face with many people that he calls friends. And then he distributes the food, and this is just as monumental a moment as him washing the feet of the disciples. To sit down for a meal with God is revolutionary. It's unheard of, it's unthinkable. And even then, they're still thinking the Messiah is going to come and take charge of the government, is going to lead an army. It wasn't until much later that they realized what Jesus was trying to accomplish. But he was trying to establish a kingdom in this moment. This Maundy Thursday in the Last Supper, where he sat down and he said, I eagerly desire to share a meal with you, says a load about the kind of kingdom and the kind of king that Jesus was and is. And so I want to spend a few minutes today talking about what it means to share a meal. I've got 12 points, but I promise I'm going to fly through them pretty quick. Number one is it's King Arthur's dream. I heard a quote recently of a toast at a meal where a person had everybody raise their glass and says, I'm not above you, I'm not below you, but I'm right there with you. Cheers. And King Arthur's, the mythological King Arthur's vision was equity, equality. And a shared meal naturally accomplishes that in some sense. See the difference between a throne and a table? Between a God who sits on a throne and commands, and a God who sits at a table and sits face to face with his friends? Where else do you get to see that face-to-face dynamic? And there have been scientific studies to show, and I think the statistic is something like 30% of all weekday meals in America are spent eating alone. It's kind of shocking, the numbers, the statistics on people who eat alone. But statistically, the studies show that those who eat with others have greater views of equity when it comes to gender, when it comes to sex, when it comes to race and creed and socioeconomic status, that people embrace equality more when they are people who eat meals with others. It's the capstone of community. Everybody eats. It's a survival need that nourishes both, not just the physical body, but mental, emotional, and spiritual. When you hear the word nourish, automatically you think food. You think physical. But we also nourish relationships. We also nourish our mental health, our emotional health, and our spiritual lives. And food around a table with others. Food alone doesn't necessarily do that. It does to a certain extent, but more so with others. To share a meal with somebody, because a meal, and specifically a meal with others, does so much to nourish mind, body, soul, spirit. To eat a meal with others is to say, I see you and you're important to me. I'm invested in your life. It defines and introduces culture. Think about when I say, the imagery that occurs in your mind when I say Italian food. You might think cheese and marinara and al dente pasta, but you also think when the moon hits your eye, like a big pizza pie. There's music tied to food. There's culture tied to food. There's tablecloths and silverware tied to food. There's history and art and family tied to food. My family growing up cooked we called meat grits, which sounds really horrible. And I promise it's not. It's sausage and ground beef woven in with oats, which already sounds pretty bad. But it's made into a loaf and then cut into slices and deep fried. I say deep fried, and all of a sudden everybody's on board with me. It's a shoe and it's deep fried, and everybody goes, that sounds delicious. But when I think of meat grits, I automatically think of Anna Maria Olinda Rinkensmeyer, my grandmother, and Herman Lewis Hussman, the first, the senior, the one whose namesake I carry. And I'm teleported back to their home. And a shared meal often shares history and family and love. Leon Arts is a guy who I cannot find a non-copyrighted image of, so you get his name on a screen today. But he's a guy who spent time in a refugee camp, and at the refugee camp that he spent time at, there was food scarcity. It was difficult to come up with food, and so he describes a time when as he describes it, he said they started acting out of fear instead of love. He says, never ever were we quicker to build fences and barriers and to justify the judgment of others. But then he also says this. He says, migrants living in their camps shared their food with us. So the other, you'll notice what's buried in this comment, is us and them. Their camps, their food shared with us. The us versus them was broken down by the sharing of food. And he says this, he says, we started talking, we shared stories, we created bonds, and we realized we had more in common than our differences. That's the power of a shared meal. I think Jesus was onto something here. It's built in shared time. There's a TED Talk that I recommend by Laura Flossie called The Power of a Shared Meal, where she says sharing a meal is a built-in opportunity to share time with others. See, love requires interaction. It's kind of built into the system. It's baked in. That it's really, really hard to love someone without interaction. And where do we find the most time in our lives to consistently share time with others? Quality time is considered one of the 5 love languages by those that are into such a thing. And there's something about just taking the time. And it's built into your system. So a shared meal and meals in general force us to slow down. It would be uncommon for somebody to always eat on the run. And if somebody always eats on the run, we would probably describe that as unhealthy. We would say you need to slow down. And we wonder, where can I find time for my friends? Where can I find time to meet with this person that's important to me? Where can I find time for my spouse or my romantic interests? It's baked into the system. God knew what he was doing. And the interesting thing is, the more consistent and more constant you are with shared meals with people, the deeper the conversation tends to go. Probably the people that you have the greatest depth of conversation with are also the people that you spend the most time with sitting at a table across from one another. It facilitates healthy conversation. Let me ask you this. When was the last time you had a knockdown, drag-out fight with somebody while eating a hot dog or an apple or ice cream. You always do this to me. We've had this conversation 1,000 times. When are you ever going to learn? Shared meals naturally indicate at least an attempt at peace. To sit across the table from somebody is to reach out and extend an olive branch. It's business and pleasure, billion-dollar deals, romantic engagements, new friendships have been formed, old friends reestablished, enemies made into friends. It all happens around a table of food. It's perfect for varied events, whether it's a special occasion, a black tie affair, or just grabbing a gas station sandwich with somebody and sitting at a booth. It reminds me of the quote from, I think it was Chevy Chase in Vacation, where he says, gas station sandwiches. I'm so hungry I could eat a gas station sandwich. And the odds are the people that you have eaten the most gas station sandwiches with in your life are also the people that you love the most. There's something about the freedom to be human with one another and eat together. It's perfect for many events. And we all know it's more than just a meal. There's food prep that goes into it. There's farmers and truckers and engineers and pilots. It could be said that to live is to eat. Imagine the systems that would fall if food were not a thing. Imagine the conversations that would not take place. And it happens before, after, and during meals. And if you're anything like me, a lot of your conversations revolve around meals. It's a gift. A shared meal is a gift. I keep a list of restaurants in Louisville in my phone, and I have a rating system between 1 and 10. And I have about 3 restaurants that are an 8.5 or above. So I'm pretty stringent. I'm pretty awful, really. I'm hard to please. The only 9 in my list is Ramsey's Cafe on the World, just so you know. There's an 8.5 on my list that we went to a triple date on this weekend with some friends. And I told them, as the meal was about to be served, that it was one of only 2 or 3 8.5s on my list. And that created vulnerability in me. I didn't know if I was overselling it at this point because they've changed their menu a lot. They've changed their pricing. Their pricing is way too high now, so it's probably going to get knocked down a little bit to like an 8 or a 7.5 in my book. But there was vulnerability and risk, and there's always vulnerability and risk in a shared meal. And so when I heard one of the people I was with say, "This is the best taco I've ever had," my life was complete at that point. I'm done. I win. Check. Life is good. There's something about not even just sharing a meal or preparing a meal for someone. Even suggesting a restaurant feels a little bit vulnerable because we know the power of food. There's a reason that people take Instagram shots of their food and share it with others. It's because of connection and community. It's because we know that a shared meal is a gift. It's the spice of life. I don't know if you have kids, or if you're familiar with a guy named Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast is one of the biggest social media influencers of all time. His videos get 300 million views, something ridiculous. And he did a video recently where he asked 2 people that had never met one another to live in a box together for 100 days. It was a big box. It was about the size of this room. I mean, it's a really big box. But if they could make it 100 days, they won $500,000. And then he would do different mind games to try to get them to come out. And so when they showed up, they had never met for the first time. They took their blindfolds off, saw each other for the first time. Even that, I'm like, nope, I'm out. $500,000 for this introvert, I can pass. But the food in this box was all along one wall. And it was big white canisters labeled chicken, rice, corn, and peas. And that's it. 100 days worth of chicken. I know, me too. Some of you are like, no, $500,000, forget about it. Chicken, rice, corn, and peas. And they had skillets and cooking oil and things like that, but no seasoning, no spices. Yeah. So if you can survive for 100 days, you win 500 grand. But guess what his first temptation was? Spice, food, a chef. He came in on like day 3 after they had eaten chicken, rice, peas, and carrots for 3 days. And small portions too. They had to ration it out. But he came in and he said, I've got this professional chef, and here's the filet mignon he cooked you today. And there's this big spread. They bring in a table, and they sit and eat. And he said, you can hire my chef for the next 97 days by taking $50,000 off your winnings. And I'm not going to tell you the decision they made, but let's just say it was very tempting. Because food is, in some sense, the spice of life. It gives us something to be excited about. I love the Super Bowl. 80% of why I love the Super Bowl is buffalo chicken, cheese, tortilla chips. I tend to eat pretty healthy, and that's one day a year. If you watch my caloric scale, I go 2,500, 2,200, 1,800, 2,500, 2,200. Super Bowl Sunday, 5,700. And I give myself the freedom to do that. And I look forward to it. Food and eating together is healthy eating in general. You're far less apt to grab and go when you're eating with someone else. And grabbing and going food tends to be less healthy. And you're also far less likely to totally gorge yourself while other people are watching. So eating, I know, makes us all pretty uncomfortable. We've all eaten alone. Similar to drinking alone, it's just a bad idea. But it promotes good health. And shared meals build trust. Imagine that you have 20 coworkers that work in your office. And 6 of them you eat with regularly. Which of your coworkers is going to have your back when the moment comes? Hopefully, odds are it's going to be the ones you eat with. Odds are they're the ones you're going to connect with, they're the ones that you can trust, they're the ones you can depend on. Shared meals build trust. So I say all that to say, on Maundy, Thursday, with the mandatum, the new command, this is my command, that you love one another as I have loved you. That when Jesus distributed the food, he was onto something. It was no longer Zeus throwing lightning bolts. This was a God who sat down face to face with people and invested in equality and community and the beauty of culture and life, love, and peace, which is different than live, love. What is it always, people? I don't even know, and I'm quite proud of that. Live, laugh, love. Which, if you've got that hanging on your wall, no judgment. Business and pleasure, slowing down, giving, courage, sacrifice, health, and trust. This is the kingdom that God was establishing. This was a moment that became known as the Eucharist, that billions and billions of people across the globe throughout history have celebrated. And it's a moment wrapped around equality, community, beauty of culture, life, love, and peace, business and pleasure, slowing down, giving, courage, sacrifice, health, and trust. And so when it's laid out like that, it feels a little bit obvious as to why Jesus would do such, why God would create such a moment, why he would eagerly look forward to sharing a meal with his friends before he suffered. But there's also this part of it that's baked in that's quite mysterious. It brings back a questionable event in Jesus' history. Because in doing so, it's described as Jesus distributing his blood and body, which sounds really cultish and weird. And it's a reference back to in John chapter 6, where Jesus said this to his followers. So Jesus had a lot of stuff that turned off his enemies. His enemies wanted to kill him. They wanted to throw him off of cliffs. They wanted to beat him to death. They plotted against him to try to take his life all the time. But this one freaked out his friends. This one tripped out his close companions. He said, "Truly I tell you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you do not have life in yourself." His friends at this moment said, "Nope, I'm out." And they left in droves. This is the kind of thing where pastors quit pastoring. This is the kind of thing where PTSD enters into ministry, where you preach one sermon and everybody's like, I don't care what our history is. I don't care the miracles I've seen you do. I don't care how close we've been. I don't care how much the kingdom of God has been opened up in my life as a result of our relationship. I'm out. I'm done. Because it tripped people out. And so then you have to ask the question of why would Jesus refer back to that moment? Why would Jesus refer back to the moment when everyone abandoned him? There was a handful of people that stuck around, and Peter said it in such a way that it resonates in my ears forever. He said, are you going to go too? And Peter said, where are we going to go? Because you have the words of eternal life. His closest, that sustains me in times of doubt. It sustains me in times of questioning, and I have a lot of doubts and a lot of questions. Is where else would I go? And I haven't found a good answer to that question. So that moment was important, but this moment, Jesus doubles down. He basically says it again. He says, you're eating my flesh and you're drinking my blood. What in the world's going on with that? He doubles down on the idea that you are what you eat, and you become like those who you eat with. And it goes back to that list: equality, community, beauty of culture, the kingdom that he was trying to establish. If you would turn to Ephesians 3 with me. We're going to read verses 14 through 19. This is the scriptures that resonate in my brain more than anything else in my life at this point. It's what I want so desperately. I hunger for this more than anything in my life. And the author of Ephesians says this. He says, for this reason I kneel before the Father, from whom every family on earth and heaven derives its name. He says, I pray that out of his glorious riches he may strengthen you with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. Then he says this, I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power, together with all the Lord's holy people, to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ. And this is what I want badly. And it seems it's painted in such a strange way that it basically says this thing is impossible, but it's possible. It says to know this love that surpasses knowledge, to know the unknowable, to know something that can't be known. It's too big. It's too grand. It's too all-encompassing. It's too amazing. Our little minds can't grasp it. But it says that we should pray for it. It says to know this love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. Now, as I've read it, there may be one little part of it that we skim over easily. It says that I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power together. And then it says, with all the Lord's holy people. In some translations it says, with all the saints, to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ. It states pretty implicitly that this knowing the unknowable love, this love that's too big, too grand, is never going to be known on an island. It's never going to be known alone. It says that you may have power together with others to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ. So you'll see this list as a list of others. This is a list that doesn't quite make sense seated alone. It doesn't quite make sense grabbing a gas station sandwich by yourself and jumping in the car and running. It makes sense sitting across the table from someone. And this is the kingdom that Jesus was trying to establish, of equality and community and love and peace, slowing down, giving, sacrifice, health and trust.